Good afternoon, everyone. This is Carol Schall at the Virginia Commonwealth University Autism Center for Excellence. We welcome you today to our Lunch and Learn session. And the topic of this Lunch and Learn is, hang on just one second, I'm having a momentary problem with the topic of this Lunch and Learn is home activities to learning experiences. For your information, excuse me, we are recording this session, and by participating, you are consenting to being recorded. Before we share this session, though, online in our archives, we will remove any identifying information to protect your privacy. Also, we're going to edit the Q&A section in the transcript, so we'll also remove your names. As I mentioned, this session is titled Lunch and Learn, Home Activities to Learning Experiences. My co-presenter today is Dr. Noelle Woolard. Noelle is joining us also from the Virginia Commonwealth University Autism Center for Excellence, and my name is Carol Schall. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you. You might be thinking, and probably the most common question I get asked by parents of children with disabilities is, how do I recreate a special education classroom in my home and still try to work from home as well? And that is indeed a difficult problem. You may have also seen schedules like this on the internet. People early on in the COVID-19 crisis would share their learning schedules for their children. And if you're the parent of a child with a developmental disability, you probably looked at this and thought that, first of all, I'm confused. There are too many colors. And then second of all, there is no way that I can do what this schedule is asking me to do, especially with my child with developmental disabilities. So there's reasons for that you know as a parent better than anyone else. You know that your child struggles with their attention span and that they have difficulty initiating activities. As a parent, you are probably someone who you can't just say to your child, go read a book, and they'll just happily walk away from you, pick a book and read it. Your child has extreme difficulty communicating, particularly if they have autism spectrum disorder. And then finally, so many of our children with autism spectrum disorder and ASD are behaviorally fragile. And what I mean by that is any kind of frustration or failure or difficulty interacting might lead to a little bit of a tantrum. And so you have to be aware of that and understand that that schedule, first of all, is difficult for a parent of a child who is typically developing to implement, but it might be even more so for the parent of a child who has a developmental disability. Let's set the real expectations, though. The chart before you was published by the Virginia Department of Education back in March. I want you to think about that. Back in March, the Virginia Department of Education said, you shouldn't be thinking about trying to give your child 6.5, 7 hours of instruction a day. Instead, you should really be thinking about your child's needs from the perspective of their attention span and their ability to attend. And so notice that if you have a pre-K child, we're really only expecting that you would interact with that child around learning time about 30 minutes a day. If your child is between the ages of K and second grade, kindergarten and second grade, we're looking at 45 to 60 minutes a day. And then you can see for the third to fifth grader, 60 to 90 minutes. So the expectation that you would provide your child with a full day of instruction from the time they wake up until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon is really much, much more than anyone expects. You can access this document, by the way, which is titled Virginia Learns Anywhere. by going to the internet. I have the internet address at the bottom of this slide. I want to set this as a beginning place. We do not expect as educators that you would keep your child engaged for most of the day. Instead, we think that you should be interacting with your child through this crisis and make sure that your child is safe, that they are not anxious, that you're not overly anxious, and that you're paying attention to your child's needs in the context of home as well. Notice that we also recommend daily reading time. And you might think to yourself, well, gosh, my child has a developmental disability and they maybe don't read independently. Well, part of this webinar is going to address that as well. So instead of thinking about how do you fill out a full day with your child and still work at your job from home, we want you to think about the fact that you can embed an awful lot of the core subject areas into your everyday activities at home. So think about this for a second. Your kitchen is a chemistry lab. Every day in your kitchen, you take and alter the chemical and physical properties of the food you prepare. And so one way to teach science is to really take advantage of your kitchen as your teaching experience. You can also teach reading and math in that same kitchen. And social studies can happen in the kitchen as well. And so we want you to take advantage of those everyday activities in your home and turn them into language or learning activities. It turns out, honestly, that for your child with developmental disabilities, those everyday activities are as important, if not more important, to your child's ultimate success in life than you might expect. So I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Noelle Woolard, who will pick up and talk about the importance of routine. Noelle?
Thanks, Carol. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see such a nice group of parents and teachers that are joining us today on this Zoom. I'm going to first talk a little bit about the importance of routine. And we all know that routine is important for any individual, but we all know that it takes a little bit of work to actually get some of these routines up and running. Our research actually tells us it takes about 3 weeks to fully establish a new routine or even learn a new habit. So we also know that learning new routines takes more effort and work in the early stages, but as components of that routine become more fluent, then we find that routines are easier to maintain over time. So routines are really important for a variety of reasons. As you develop and maintain a consistent routine, you're probably going to see reduced anxiety on potentially your part as well as your child's part. You'll probably see some increased self-control as well. You certainly will see increased independence in terms of self-help and leisure skills. And then while you're doing this, you're strengthening lifelong habits that can improve quality of life. So one of the things that we're really focusing on within the Zoom session is that by building a consistent routine that you're doing each and every day, you're creating your own learning opportunities at home. And these are naturally learning opportunities that we can take advantage of in a variety of ways. So in order to do that, just to kind of give you a sample, our next slide shows a sample natural home routine. And Carol and I really wanted to highlight the beginning part of your day, because most often for many of us parents, like myself, you're working from home and you've got, 1, 2, or 3 kids at home that really needs your time and attention. Morning time is really the best time for me as a working parent to spend some time with my children. We get up in the morning together. We're able to follow that morning routine and kind of work and incorporate some of this naturalistic learning opportunities. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you have the child and the different aspects of their morning routine that they may come into contact with. And on the right-hand side, we've listed several different learning opportunities. And we really highlighted those core concepts, those core areas of academics, but you can also include your language-based kinds of activities as well into this. So we're going to kind of take one at a time. So let's look at our morning routine to include dressing and hygiene. Okay, so dressing, that's a really important thing. Within the dressing component and within the hygiene component, we have health and we have weather. Both of those are concepts that are included in science, okay? So let's look at the dressing one. So in the morning when we're getting dressed, it's really important to determine what types of clothing you need to wear. And in Virginia, we've got some kind of crazy weather where it can be cold on days and the very next day it's very warm. So some of the ways we can incorporate science into this is to have our kids look out the window and just identify what the weather might be based on what they see outside. For some of our more older learners, we might give them our phone or our computer and have them pull up a weather app. And they might look for their weather in their home. For me, it's Whitestone, Virginia. One of the things that we're doing more in our house is we're kind of reading print material. And so this is our Sunday paper, the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And on the bottom here, it actually has a table of contents where you might find weather information within the paper. So these are some kinds of things that as a parent, I really didn't have time to kind of do with my kids until now when we're spending so much time together at home. So that with the hygiene, that's another thing. So we can focus on the science aspect of, you know, washing our hands and talking about germs and things like that, brushing our teeth and talking about proper oral hygiene. So these are really important things and will increase our quality of life. So moving on to breakfast, our family is spending more time in our kitchen cooking different breakfast related items that we wouldn't have time to do in the past. So within breakfast, there are concepts of reading and math that we can focus on. So in terms of reading, I went in my pantry and I pulled out a pancake batter, a pancake mix. And on the back of that pancake mix, there are two different recipes, one for flapjacks or pancakes and one for waffles. So you'll notice on here, you've got all of your text that's written from top to bottom, and it's you also have your visual support on the top, okay? So keep going on with the reading thing. We also in my pantry have the Belgian Waffle mix, okay? And I want you guys to notice the difference in the way that this recipe is displayed from the recipe that I just showed you. So we've got our visual support is on the side here, and then you also have your ingredients and all your step-by-step kind of listed sequentially, okay? So this is also a nice opportunity for us to generalize some of our skills in terms of reading and being able to read a variety of different types of recipes or instructions to create different types of foods. So moving on to math, within this recipe here for our Kodiak cakes, it requires 1 cup of pancake mix and it requires 3/4 cups of water. So within my kitchen and probably within yours as well, you're going to have different types of tools that you can use to measure out these different ingredients. So this is another opportunity for us to generalize that this measuring cup filled up to the 1 mark is 1 cup, but this also filled to the top is 1 cup as well. So many different opportunities to kind of generalize skills and just practice different types of skills as well. So the final task on this sample natural home routine is the choice of learning activities. And this is really, really important for so many of our students with autism, developmental disabilities, but it's also really important for any kid. So we want to make sure that they know how to select activities that are age appropriate, that are friendly, that are just appropriate to what, as parents, we want our kids to be reading or being exposed to. So we want to make sure that for some kids, we might offer a menu of different learning activities that they could move to, or for some other kids, we may teach them to go from one learning activity to another while we as parents are potentially working from home.
So to further discuss this whole issue, I wanted to show a short video, and it's from the movie Kramer versus Kramer. And just give me a second to, actually, I think I'll just open it from here. And I'm going to share.
Google's premium video meetings, now free for everyone. And it's right in your calendar.
Okay, so that little clip is from the movie Kramer versus Kramer. And I chose that because I wanted you to see the idea that when we work with students with developmental disabilities, we really want to think about what can we do that's safe for them. Certainly, if you have a child with fairly significant disabilities, you may not want them cooking, but you can see that young child was actually helping dad, in this case, Dustin Hoffman, prepare French toast. Now, you might have a child who doesn't read, and Noelle already showed you how a lot more packages are coming with visual supports to assist those who have difficulty reading, but we also have a resource for you that can help you make that whole making French toast an interactive experience for your child where you're really teaching them. So there's a wonderful website called Accessible Chef. It's at the bottom of your screen. And you can find tons and tons and tons of free picture recipes for you. And they show you first the ingredients to make French toast. Next, you'll see the tools that you need so you can work with your child to identify all of these various tools. And then I've actually taken the liberty of making these smaller and putting them side by side. But these are the exact steps that we just saw the young child follow. And so when you're even using a picture recipe for a child with a developmental disability counts as reading literacy. As Noelle pointed out, you're measuring, you're calculating. And so even if you have a child who maybe doesn't count at this point, following patterns is a very important math skill that you can teach. So you could teach setting the table or counting the number of items that you need to set the table. So if there's two of you, you need 2 forks, you need 2 spoons, you need 2 knives, and you can do a lot of matching and setting. And so you can do both the idea of counting, but also matching to a pattern, which is also another example of how you can extend this activity and turn it into a learning activity. In terms of science, as I mentioned earlier, your kitchen is a chemistry lab. And so you're observing changes in food as you prepare it. You've got the soft, mushy egg-soaked bread that turns into a more solid bread. It changes color, it changes texture. You can look at eggs as you make them, turn from liquid to solid, and you can talk about how juice comes from oranges. These are all science concepts that you can teach in the context of kitchen. Finally, you can address social studies by talking about table manners, why we eat breakfast, how breakfast has changed over the years, how in the old days, people used to eat whatever was left over from dinner the night before. So they'd have whatever stew was in the pot. Well, today we have defined breakfast very, very differently. If you want to round out this activity, so you've just worked your way through breakfast with your child and you've turned that activity into a learning experience. You've addressed all 4 core subjects in the learning curriculum. The final is you could actually create a story. So when your child is reading on their own, they can read a story. I have another resource here for you called the Tar Heel Reader. And I want to show you the Tar Heel Reader in particular because it is a tool that you can use to get free, easy to read stories. So Tar Heel Reader is a really fun website that you can either make your own story or you can search for a story. So when you go on to Tar Heel Reader, they have tons and tons of stories. So I just searched toaster waffles since we're on the topic of breakfast. They already have a story all about toaster waffles. It's a very simple story to read on the computer, or I can actually set my computer to read it to me. And as you can see, the toaster waffles are there. And the child can read through this story very simply, or they can have the story read to them, or you can read it with them. It's a fun site. Another activity that you can engage in is making your own story. And so that making your own story can come from an app on your phone called Story Creator. It's free. We're always a fan of free apps at ACE, and we don't want to spend your money. And so what you could do is take pictures of your child making their breakfast and then turn that into a simple 4 or 5 page story. That's where you can build your library of stories that are available to your child for their independent reading time. And so we have just demonstrated so far how you can take your morning routine and turn it into about an hour of instruction for your child just by adding a little bit extra into your morning. Noelle, I think you have some visual supports as well that you wanted to show, right?
I do. And so one of the things that I've been really cognizant of during this time is how many resources are available online for free. So sometimes we have to be kind of careful about what we search and what we find, but I was very lucky because I was looking for some tools online to support setting the table. So I thought this was a really nice extension activity to Carol's making French toast. I consider French toast to be kind of a fancy meal in terms of breakfast at home. So, it's very appropriate to make sure that you set the table if you're going to be serving French toast. So the first thing that I kind of want to show you is a visual support or a visual schedule for the different steps, the sequence of steps to set the table. And so this is a very simple way to set the table. You'll notice on the left that there is the visual, the picture of the actual table setting up kind of situation. And on the right, it is the text and the words. And then all the way to the far right, there are some check boxes so that your child can actually check off each of the steps once they complete them. So many of our kids like to have a way to kind of check things off or scratch things off on a list when they are going through them to kind of keep them on track, and also to let them know when the activity or task is complete. Setting the table has a very clear beginning and a very clear end. When all your items are set, you're done. So this is a nice visual support, but I wanted to show you also a short video that I found. It was the first video that I found when I searched on YouTube. and it is video modeling for setting the table. And as we watch this, I want you guys to kind of watch and listen for the different academic and language-based skills that are incorporated within this video. Kind of write them down because we're going to chat about them.
Setting the table. First, put a plate on the table. Put a napkin next to the plate. Put a fork on the napkin. Put a knife on the other side of the plate. Put a spoon next to the knife.
Sorry about that, Noelle.
Okay. This is why we're always so flexible, right?
Yeah. We probably have enough of that video. Do you think?
I think so. Yep.
Okay.
So since we have a good number of people on this Zoom right now, if we could, I'm going to open up the chat, and could you chat about the different tasks or the different skills that you observed in that short little snippet?
Somebody wrote sequencing of steps.
I see that.
Motor skills, following directions, positional words, executive functioning, great step-by-step, motor imitation, left and right, fine motor skills, very specific where to place the items in relation to others, balance, math, reading, tool, vocabulary. Gosh, you guys are typing so fast. Listening and performing.
Yep.
Tools for their functions, directional, vocabulary, relationship skills. Excellent.
Yep.
Left, right.
This is amazing. So you can see in this kind of simplistic task all the different types of skills that you could potentially strengthen. So you came up with a bigger list than I did. So I found the sequencing of tasks, the using a first, next, and last language, the preposition certainly, identification of silverware, and then just a general nice task completion activity. So, and I will say that that activity is really nice because it can also generalize to other things. So in the event that one day we'll be allowed to go back into restaurants and eat, even fancy restaurants, our kids can sit down and they'll actually know where all the silverware needs to be placed, or at least appreciate the placement of that. And for those of our kids that are looking for, you know, a side job at some point, or a job working in the restaurants, this would be a really good skill for them to have under their belt. So I'm going to shift right now and talk about parents and teachers as collaborative partners. So we all know that COVID-19 has really given us some unique opportunities. It's really kind of changed things. Our kids are home all the time, but it's also given us an opportunity for our families and our teachers to collaborate at this time to plan for home instruction. So because of that, at VCU ACE, we created a document to help facilitate this collaboration between teachers and parents. So within our document, it actually has two different components. The first component of this document is a list of structured questions. And so these structured questions are meant for an educator to ask a parent to kind of look at the areas of focus within the day that the parent really would like maybe some additional help. So our questions are specifically, describe a typical day at home with your child. So the teacher's asking this to the parent. Describe any changes that you would like to make to your daily routine. Number 4, what activities do you do with your child where you feel, or your child feels, especially successful? And what activities do you do with your child where you are challenged or struggling? And then finally, the most important, I think, is what activities would you like to teach your child that you believe will improve your life at home? So these 6 questions can be used to develop what we call a home learning plan. And Carol's going to go to the next slide so we can see that. So basically within the home learning plan, we have 7 different columns. Within the first 4 columns, we're going to have some information, or we're going to add some information in there that is specific to areas that the parent identified that they want to work on. So this home learning plan is not IEP driven. This is parent driven, and this is basically to help the teacher come up with strategies that can help the parent at home with anything that they may want to teach their child, or maybe a schedule or routine that they would like to maintain for their child. So the first 4 questions are parent identified through that questionnaire. And then the last 3 columns are what the teacher develops for the parent or for the family to kind of teach that skill or to strengthen that skill. So specifically starting on the left, the first parent identified question would be, what is the activity or routine for which the parent or the family seeks help? So just as an example, we put waiting for a preferred item or activity, because that sometimes is difficult for some of our students or for some of our children. The second column is, when will this activity or routine occur within the day? And so for this example, we wrote naturalistic times when the teacher or when waiting is required. The third question is, how often should the family try to practice the activity or the routine? And within this example, we put any time during the day where waiting is required. And then the fourth column is when or who will teach this routine. And so the parent has said that they will teach this routine or this skill, and an older sibling as well. So the last 3 columns, again, as I mentioned, are the teacher developed and recommended types of things. So materials that the family will need to implement this. So the teacher or the parent will create a card or a piece of paper that says, wait, please. And there may be a timer on a phone that is used to teach this. What steps would the family follow? And then we've listed out the steps for implementation of this skill. And I really like the last column because it's what tips might the teacher provide to the family to make this teaching a little easier. So approach teaching this skill in a fun game-like way and slowly increase the amount of time the student is asked to wait. And then we can encourage the parent to write down the amount of seconds the child is able to wait. And then the teacher could probably graph that for the parent so that we could see some progress if that's something that the parent would like to see. So this would be the home learning plan, and it is developed by gathering information from the family on ways that the family would just like to maybe focus, different areas the family would like to focus on. Again, it is not IEP driven. It is not related to measuring any progress on an IEP. This is to really support the family at home.
We wanted to end by reminding you again about some free resources that are available, and then we're going to move to the chat function, and Stacy is going to help us by reading the questions that you've included in the chat. First, always check our website at VCU ACE. We have a whole page of COVID-19 resources. In addition, we have a whole page of parent resources. These lunch and learn sessions are all recorded, and you can watch them again if you so choose. As I mentioned, we do edit them so that your personal information is shielded and we don't share that. There are a number of free picture cards that you can get on the internet for home activities. We mentioned the accessiblechef.com website earlier for accessing picture recipes that you could use with your child. And we demonstrated how you could turn that cooking activity into an entire lesson that covers reading, math, science, and social studies. But we also want to highlight a page called Do to Learn, and that's the number 2. So it's DO2learn.com. This website has a mix of paid and free resources, so do be careful when you're on it to make sure that you don't pick a paid resource unless it's really very important to your family. But they have a number of free picture schedules and for routines such as getting dressed in the morning, using the restroom, washing hands, etc. And then finally, the other resource that we referenced as we walked through this activity is the Tar Heel Reader. And this is really an excellent resource. If you have a child who's maybe at a middle or high school level, but struggles to read, and so you have trouble finding books that are on their reading level in their interest areas, Tar Heel Reader is an excellent place to go. Finally, you can always make your own stories and books that can be read to, or you can read with your child by downloading an app to your smartphone or your tablet called Story Creator. And this will allow you to take your everyday activities and turn them into stories. It's very motivating to individuals to read their own stories in print. And so there's nothing more exciting to a child than like reading a story that has their name in it. Suddenly it seems very much more real. And so these are all suggestions that we have. I know that earlier we also got a question that was in the chat before we go to the chat that was by a parent of a child with high functioning autism who really resists learning activities at home. And that parent was looking for some suggestions. So let me go ahead and address that as we move into the chat. One of the things that you really want to focus on, especially during this time when your child is at home with you, is to make sure that you focus on activities that are motivating to the child. And so it's okay if your child with high functioning autism who has an extreme interest in, I don't know, train schedules, for example, spends more time reading about train schedules while they're home during COVID-19. They will learn from that experience. It's also a really good practice to engage them in activities that they're motivated. If your child is hungry, that's a perfect time to go into the kitchen and involve them in cooking, and then use that cooking experience to expand their knowledge. Obviously, if your child is on the end of the spectrum where they have more academic abilities, you may actually want to engage them in a much more academic way. So for example, you might want to ask them to calculate portion sizes based upon the number of eggs that you're making. Or you might want them to identify the ratio of flour to sugar in a banana bread recipe that you're putting together. Those are ways that you could take that cooking experience and scale it up to someone who has more skill. But it also is capitalizing on the motivation of eventually eating that banana bread. And so looking for those kind of activities that have built-in reinforcement and payoff is going to be very helpful for those high functioning individuals. Stacy, did you want to jump in now and help us with some other questions that may have—
Absolutely. So there was one question: how do I address words like next when he's confused with the usage and placement and time?
That's a really good question. And there's actually been some very interesting research on the problems with teaching positional words for individuals with ASD. And so what you might want to do is always match next in terms of time with a picture schedule. Many of our other episodes in this Lunch and Learn series have addressed picture schedules and how we can use them. And so time is such an elusive concept, especially for me right now through COVID-19. I never know what day it is. And it's just really odd for me to go through the week. It seems like every day is the same as the last. However, I use my calendar and I use my schedules to help me orient. So for someone who's struggling with next, we could use a picture schedule that we refer to as a first then or first next schedule. What we do here is we might say, first we get dressed, next we eat breakfast. And that's really hard for a child to understand. So by turning that into a picture and saying, first we get dressed and we have a picture of someone getting dressed, next we eat breakfast and we have a picture of breakfast, that makes that experience a little more concrete. And so you always want to strive to make those time concepts as concrete as you can by using pictures. Noelle, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the things that helped me as a teacher teach that concept was kind of pairing the first, next, and last language with the language that they're exposed to in school, especially with the ASOL. So first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and kind of pairing that together. I usually made a type of template for my sequencing. So I would have the template that was already mapped out like on a piece of paper, and I would draw the shape of the sequencing cards, and I would put first, next, last, and I would also model that language as well. So I found that pairing some of that language together with the visuals was very helpful for my students.
Stacy, any other questions?
Yep. So there's a question. Are school divisions around Virginia providing special education services to students at home? If so, how? Dawn, are you from outside of Virginia?
No, actually, I'm from Lynchburg City, but I do the federal set aside. And so we've kind of been directed to not provide services at this point. So we're doing IEP meetings and ISP meetings, but we're not actually providing any direct services right now. But I was wondering what might be headed in our direction if we keep going like this.
It's a good question, Dawn, and it's a question that we can't directly answer because we know of what some divisions are doing. But it's a question that I might, because of your particular role in your division, I might refer you to contact your person at the Department of Education for that question. However, I will say that most people are providing some level of either online or packet kind of activities for folks to do at home. I don't know of anyone in the state who's providing what we would call a direct service, where a teacher actually goes to a child's house and engages in some learning activity. I think that has been, for right now, by governor's order, that has been stopped. So but there are divisions, depending upon the availability of internet connection, who are ensuring that students have access to Chromebooks, and they're delivering those Chromebooks. And there might be meetings between teachers and students online. There are some teachers who are actually even doing this for very young children. Like they're having a weekly meeting with the parent or with the child while the child's home through Zoom or some other distance software like Google Hangout or Google Classroom.
Okay, we did send packets home to begin with, just regular generic things. I guess the reason we haven't been doing like the Google Hangouts and Google Zoom is due to the confidentiality and not knowing who could be in the room, either on our end or their end. And so, yeah.
I think it does create some ethical challenges that every school division has addressed in their own way. So I would refer you to the Department of Education to talk through that in more detail. Okay.
Okay, next question. Our child wants to take frequent breaks while doing non-preferred tasks. How can we encourage our son to work for short periods without taking breaks?
I like the one more technique than a break. And let me preface this by saying, if your child won't have a major behavioral episode where you're at risk or the health of your house is at risk. And I also think, yet again, making very clear what the time is or the expectation is. there's a tool on the phone that you can get for free called the time timer. I'm going to open my time timer and see if you can see that. Oops, I'm not holding it. It's called time timer. And as I move it and set a time, it creates a red block. And as time counts down, that red block gets smaller and smaller. That's a way to help a child understand how much of an activity they have to do. And so if I use that time timer to show the child that they are going to work only for, I set this to 30 minutes, which is a little long. I would actually not work with a child nonstop, especially one who struggles for 30 minutes. But if I make that time timer available for the child to see, and I hold to it, this is another thing that's very important. When that time timer goes off, if I'm mid-sentence with a child, I want that child to trust me. And so the minute that time timer goes off, I say, break time, you get to do whatever you want. And then I'm going to use the time timer again to say, your break lasts 5 minutes. And so with a child like that, I usually want to do a work, play, work, play, work, play. So work for 5 minutes, break for 5 minutes, work for 5 minutes, break for 5 minutes. And I really want the first thing that that child does when they come back to work to be a very positive and reinforcing thing. So we might do their favorite activity the very first moment they come back. This is also, I know Noelle's ready to jump in and talk about visual schedules, right, Noelle?
Well, I was actually going to just say something a little different. I was going to say, you know, many times when we ask our kids to do something, they may not necessarily understand what we're asking them to do, or they may not actually have that academic skill under their belt already to do it fluently. And so it requires an awful lot of effort. And so they may decide to kind of get up and move away from the situation. So you want to first make sure that the student already has that skill within their repertoire. It's already something that they know to do or know how to ask for help if they can't do it. One really easy way or nice way to kind of figure that out is to, if this is an activity that he kind of walks away more often than not, have his preferred motivator or his preferred treat or food that he doesn't get often, and let him know, when you finish this, then you can have this treat. If you find that he walks away from the activity, it may be that he really truly doesn't know how to do that task very well in order to complete it. But he might also finish it and get the motivator that you have. And that would demonstrate to you that he does have that skill under his belt. However, he chooses not to demonstrate that skill. So it's kind of nice to know, when he walks away, is it because he doesn't have that skill set, or is it because he lacks the motivation to complete that skill?
That's really, really an excellent point, Noelle. And it's a very subtle way for you as a parent to test. Am I asking my child to do something that's really hard for them, that seems simple to me, but is really hard for them? Or is my child resisting because it's something that they just don't want to do? They don't like to comply. So good tip.
Someone had a great website for cooking, abletolearn.com, and it was created by a person with autism, and that too is free. One person asked, is Story Creator private, or does it share with the online community?
I believe you make a private story to your phone. I actually downloaded this yesterday. I don't like to recommend apps that are not something that I tried. Your app creates your story online, and or not online, for yourself. It's your own story. You can share it, but you have to elect to share it. So this is a story that I wrote. We actually went to the strawberry farm. We got to wear masks. So I have a picture of my daughter holding a strawberry with her mask on, you know, etc. So it was a really nice, because you're using your own pictures to create it, but it's my own story. It's on my own site or my own phone. And I have to elect to share it. And that's when I have to create a account with the story creator. Stacy, I wonder if you want to put the polls up while we continue at this point.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So there are two polling questions. One, did you find this information presented useful? And then, what is your connection to autism? And we'll leave that up for the remainder of the time. Okay, do you have any suggestions of activities for autistic students who do not have internet access?
This is really great because most of what we've been talking about doesn't have internet access. Now, if you are a teacher or a service provider and you're providing support to someone who doesn't have internet access, I would recommend that you maybe print down and do a porch drop off of some of those visual recipes. Noelle, do you have some ideas? I saw you like lean forward.
I feel like so much of what we talked about today was how to basically take what you have at home already accessible to you at your fingertips and create a learning opportunity around that. So I feel as though the home learning plan is a perfect way to kind of capture some of those learning opportunities that are naturally happening at home. And, you know, to be quite honest with you, from a parent's perspective, I've had so much more time now to kind of strengthen those skills in my own kids here at home because we just have that time, you know? So for me, I feel like this is the time to really strengthen things that, that are naturally occurring at home that will improve quality of life for the entire family.
Yeah, I think that home learning plan that was a part of our parents, teachers, and I think it's called Parents and Teachers as Collaborators, really does provide you with that opportunity to talk with the parent over the phone and walk them through how they might teach their child to wait, or if the parent is really struggling with that morning routine, getting dressed, or, you know, whatever the skills are that a parent identifies that they'd really like to work on.
Some people had some great comments about helping, having your children help out with chores around the house.
Yes.
That goes along with what you and Noelle were talking about today.
Another great set of activities that really you can turn into learning. And yet again, if you have a child who struggles more with learning, you can always have them. So for example, when you're dusting, you can have them follow the pattern that you're creating when you dust so that you're modeling and then they're doing it. If you're working on vacuuming, your child could then follow that pattern yet again. But if they're higher functioning, you could calculate square foot. you could calculate dust per inch. You know, there are lots of ways to take your home activities and turn them into learning activities.
And I will say, for those of you that have access to the internet, when I found that video on teaching how to set the table, and I let the video run through, then there were so many other video modeling examples for other household tasks that popped up automatically after that, that were literally, you know, 1 minute to 1 minute and 15 seconds in length, and really broke those skills down beautifully in a nice, concise way. So, you know, YouTube can be your friend in terms of teaching some of these basic household skills that everybody really needs to know how to do.
Okay, any tips for helping to focus? Let me see. Focusing to listen to laptop learning versus live learning. My son gets distracted and trying to understand why teacher's in his laptop.
That's a really good question. You know, and I think for a child with autism or an individual with autism, it's really confusing to move from having somebody standing in front of you to having someone in your laptop. And so if you can have them practice watching some other learning videos and maybe make the connection between a YouTube video and your teacher kind of being on YouTube to teach you, that might be helpful. It might also, with a child like that, take some of your interaction with that child to sit with them and work them through the activities.
Yeah. I think also thinking about the duration that we're expecting our kids to do that, it's really difficult. I know for me, I'm on Zoom meetings all day long, and I am technical assistance associate. So I'm used to being in schools and doing hands-on interaction with kids and teachers. So it was hard for me to kind of transition to that. So I feel like maybe slowly building them up to being able to tolerate online learning in a more systematic way would be beneficial.
We have another question, and this might make it a little more difficult for Stacy, who's tracking the chat box and helping us with questions. But if you could, one of the things we want to learn more about is what you'd like to learn in these lunch and learn sessions. We've found them to be very successful, and lots of people are attending, and we're really grateful for your joining us in these little hour-long sessions where we pick a topic, but we'd like to hear from you. So if you would take a moment, go to the chat box and type in some other topics that you'd like to hear more about on our lunch and learn sessions. That would help us as we continue to plan these activities. It's our plan to keep these going through the summer, into the fall, and who knows, we may do this forever. So,
I see some topics, Carol, that we've been talking about in our meetings.
oh, excellent. Excellent. Stacy, are there any other questions that have popped up in the chat box while we've been working?
Not yet. What is the web address for Story Creator? Can you pull that slide back?
Yeah, let me go. I actually don't have the web address here on this PowerPoint, but let me go back. I actually searched storytelling apps, and that's how I found Story Creator. So that's, yeah, I don't have the web address for Story Creator. I searched it in my app store. I have an iPhone platform, but I also did see that it was on the Android platform as well. I also wanted to show you our next Lunch and Learn next week. Yet again, you'll get the wonderful Dr. Woolard, who will be presenting a session on practical ideas for maintaining and creating structure at home. So those of you who were thinking about how do I teach next, how do I keep my child engaged, that's actually going to be the direct topic of our next Lunch and Learn. She's going to be co-presenting with Lauren Vitier, who is our new Technical Assistance Associate, and you can sign up on the VCUACE website. In addition, if you have questions or you would like more information, you can always go to our autismcenter.org, vcuautismcenter.org, or you can email us at autismcenter@vcu.edu.
There are lots of great topics coming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us today. It was a pleasure to see so many wonderful faces. I saw some familiar names in these little boxes in Zoom. And I am excited to be presenting next week. And we are going to be sharing 10 different tips that you can use when you create and maintain new routines and structure within your home.
Have a great afternoon, and thank you for joining us during your lunch hour.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.